The dreaded DT into archon-drop opening for Protoss vs Zerg. Something which has Zerg pros always saying, free damage. Bullshit, Imber. Why would you never do this opening? It's unfair. It's a really good build order, and that's what we're looking at today, guys. Welcome to the daily. Thank you very much for hanging out. Ignore the strange noises that my computer makes. Let's dive straight into game, and I will walk you through this build order. So, we are going to be looking at a replay of Probe vs Cham from WCS Austin. And I'm going to show you the safe, solid, most standardized version of the build. Of course, like I said, it is an archon-drop build order. So as always, you rally your very first probe down to the low ground, and you want to be going for a low ground wall off against Zerg most of the time. If you prefer to play a different way, it doesn't matter too much, but just same as always, standard 14 pylon. And of course, then going immediately for the gateway on 16 supply, going for a gateway scout with the probe, check that there's no early pulls, a 16 gas as well. Following that, it will be a 19 Nexus. Queue up one more probe after the Nexus starts, then go for your 20 cybernetic score. You then restart probe production. Probe production is then constant from this point, no more gaps, and go straight for a second gas on 21 supply and a second pylon on 22 supply. This is your most typical opening. You do this pretty much every game when you're not opening up with a, sort of one base rush as Protoss. Pretty typical stuff. You guys would have seen it before. The probe here of probe is going to be scouting her out. It's going to see this fast third base. Nice to try and check to see if there's a fast third hatch. It's seen hatch gas pool other than that, so he knows there's nothing to worry about. Now, as soon as your warp, your cyber core finishes, you want to start warp gate research and an adept, and you want to chrono boost that adept. And as soon as that adept finishes, otherwise you're just probing up, of course, rallying to your natural once your main's saturated. And you're going to go immediately for a Stalker and a Mothership Core as soon as that Adept's finished. There we go, Stalker and Mothership Core. After that, so it's very simple. Adept, Stalker, Mothership Core. You just want to go next 100 gas, immediately Twilight Council. But right on time, probe with a very tight build order. Now, a nice little point here is you are meant to scout. He's already seen the third base, so he doesn't need to check that, but he wants to check the drone count in the natural, and you'll notice he sees, oh yeah, there's a good number of drones there. So he doesn't feel too worried about an all-in, and that Adept is going to go right home after that, knowing that Ling speed would normally be done at about 330. Interestingly, Cham actually cut Ling speed this game, trying to be just a little bit greedy. This is something I was thinking about recently. It's a cute little adjustment you can make sometimes. But anyway, back on point. After the 100 gas on the Twilight Council, the next 100 gas goes down on a Robo. And when that Twilight finishes, you'll notice you won't have 150 gas for the DT Shrine straight away, but that is nonetheless the next thing you'll be spending gas on. So as soon as Probe has 150 gas, you can see he's already moves his Probe into position early, puts down the DT Shrine immediately. And right after that DT Shrine goes down, your next money will be on 3 more gateways. So we see here Probe goes gateway, gateway, gateway. Creates a nice little choke point there. And once again, Robo finishes soon after that. 200 minerals. Look at, times out beautifully. Chrono Boost swaps over onto the robotics. Get the Warp Prism out. And once that Warp Prism started, you go for 2 more assimilators. Now, something I forgot to point out, guys. This pylon here went down on 40 supply. The entire detailed build order list is written down for you guys in the build order notes on Spawning Tool. So check out that in the comment section below if you are watching this on YouTube. Now, he's actually going to go and throw a pylon up here. You can't always secure a fast third behind this because your real focus is on that Warp Prism, getting to the other side of the map, warping in DTs. However, if they don't have Zerglings here, and in this case, hey, he skipped Zergling speed, you always want to go and try to put out the pylon at this stage, and then get that Nexus up. You'll notice he also built another pylon back here, so clearing up plenty of supply to make sure he can warp in DTs and keep up probe production. This is really good play. So to just go rewind very quickly, I'll fast forward you guys through this little moment. So check it out. Pylon goes down there at 50 supply, moves out with a probe, drops another pylon, and then drops a Nexus on about 54 supply. Now, it's really cool if the Zerg doesn't pressure and lets you get away with this, because then there's already a pylon up and a Mothership Core has 3 full overcharges. It can defend this third from a horde of units. Now, he's warped in 4 DTs. Very important you can warp in all 4 at once, so you need to be not supply blocked. You need to have enough money for all of them, which is why you're going to be tight with the build. Comes in to check. There is detection, and he just pulls back. So you always want to commit with that pressure, but if they've got detection, you just pull back, make sure you go to a safe place. Notice he didn't do it there. He went down the cliff, morph those archons because you can't pick them up while they're morphing, and then he's just going to look for pressure. Now, behind all this, what's he been doing? Nothing. Just probe production, hasn't been building gateway units except those DTs. The Robo had a big gap in production and then built an observer after the DTs started warping in. Only after the DTs started warping in, because that costs a lot of gas. You don't want it to slow down your Dark Templar, but it'll come across, and that's going to allow him to start clearing up these creep tumors. Only after that observer do you start Immortal production. From here, the build is complete. This is the build. Up to about 6 minutes. From here, you go however the hell you want. Ignore this robotics bay. This is a bit of an odd transition which Probe is going for. And let's talk a little bit about what you normally would want to do in the follow-up. So what would you want to do in the follow-up, guys? Well, there's two different ways. One is you don't really build many probes for your third. You just keep building Immortals out of your Robo. And once you have 2 or 3 Immortals, you go for what I like to call the stats timing, because stats used to use this like every game against Zergs, and you would just wreck them. Basically, you make a few sentries, you get those 2 Immortals, you go across the map, meet up with your Archons, you've been making charge and like a whole shit ton of gateways, and then you just morph in charge lots and you go. And it works so well because you're hitting at this point where the Zerg is trying to drone up to 3-4 bases, and they don't really have, they're not going to have Baneling speed yet. So they're not going to have many Banelings to deal with the charge lots, and they're also not going to have many Ravagers to deal with the force field. So usually the Zerg either has plenty of Ravagers and the force fields aren't that great, but it doesn't matter because your charge lots just jump on top of them and they don't have an answer. Or they've got Banelings, but then they don't have enough Ravagers, and your force fields just zone out the Banelings. Your Archons and Immortals make mincemeat of them. So that's a really good way you can follow it up. And the other way, the more standard macro way, is to just drop down all those macro structures. So that's where you right now, you'd be going for 3 or 4 more gateways, a forge, and then you can start things like Storm. Of course, you can make a Templar Archives, you can make Storm, you can make a second Robo, start pumping out those Immortals, doing all those standard late-gamey sort of macro-focused things that give you a really good Protoss army as the game progresses. But like I said, I don't want to focus too much on the execution from here. The whole idea is you just want to keep coming in from different angles, clearing up creep, trying to drop in new places where the enemy isn't prepared. You'll see Cham is very well prepared as being a high-level pro gamer. But you just keep rotating around, looking for damage, and one of the big parts of actually getting value out of this build and making sure it works incredibly well is knowing the finesse of the micro, knowing how to get the most out of those Archons. So guys, we'll go and take a look at a couple of micro tricks, see what we can get done. Alright, so let's dive straight into game and take a look. So first things first, how do you pick up your Archons? Now, my favorite way is just to float the Warp Prism around, and whenever I want, I can just right-click on those Archons. Now, you're going to notice, okay, that's cool, but you can also do it another way. You don't have to do it that way. I could, as long as the Warp Prism's in range, click the Archon, click on the Warp Prism. Click the Archon, click on the Warp Prism. That works just as well. Of course, I always like to try and keep these units on a hotkey. So at any point, if I'm selecting something else, I can double tap the hotkey and go, oh, get in the Warp Prism, run away. And I don't have to actually click on anything. So I can be off on the other side of the map, microing my workers, and then I can just go, oh, get in the Warp Prism, fly away. Just double tap the hotkey. Okay, the other thing is that fancy micro you just saw me doing, which is the dropping while moving. So to drop while moving, you have to press your drop hotkey while, and then left click. On the Warp Prism itself. God, that micro is so much fun. Oh, that's so much fun. So just to do that in slow-mo for you guys, what you do is you go drop, left click. And it will continue doing drop, left click. It'll continue doing any move commands you give it. Sometimes this map bugs out a little bit. That's the only reason you saw them drop. So drop left click and they drop out. Get back in there. Drop left click and you can micro it around. They'll unload and you can command it however. So to do the fancy micro, oops. Let's slow that down and I'll show you one more time exactly what I'm doing. This is really fun. You don't need to know how to do this, but pick up. So drop, left click, right click, 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 drop, left click. Ooh, look at that. Beautiful. Friggin' 12 kills, 13 kills apiece. That's some sick fun micro. So you can get so much value out of your Archons. But normally you don't need to do that fancy stuff. That's just useful if someone's trying to fight you with heavy Zergling. Not every player can pull that micro off. You don't really need to. As long as you basically just always go in, keep your Warp Prism behind the Archons. Don't just click your hotkey in. Don't just be like, oh, doop-de-doop, because you're going to notice, look. If I just say, oh, there's an enemy base there, click in. Even if the Warp Prism starts behind the Archons, it's faster. It'll catch up. So if you're not watching and a couple of Queens are there, they focus down the Warp Prism really quickly. So normally your idea is attack. You can just attack move the Archons, and you just kind of keep the Prism about this distance behind them. At any point, you can just pick up, fly away. Beautiful. All right, so there were a couple questions in chat, sorry, not in chat, but just when I was talking to people about this guide, which I wrote down some of the more interesting questions. The first one is, this build is so common now. All the Zergs just have their Queens in position. I don't think it's very good anymore. The Zergs are always ready. Be creative. Come in from a different angle. You don't always need to come in from the same angle. And remember, you don't need to do massive direct damage. You can always just come in from a separate angle, and try to find damage in new and creative ways. You can improve your micro and do that, but you don't need to do direct damage. This is a solid macro build. You have a third base behind it. You've got a lot of stuff going on. So by no means do you need to just win the game with this push or even do any direct damage. If they've got plenty of Roaches and Queens, they've invested in that. They've invested in the Overseers, the Spores. That in of itself is some really good damage. Finally, how do I react if I'm getting all in? So this one's reasonably straightforward. So your Adept, as I pointed out earlier, it will scout the drone count in the natural, and if there's not many drones, you kind of know there's a very fast all in, which requires you to react quickly. Basically, you just chrono units out of your gateway, you start building Immortals rather than your Warp Prism when your Robo finishes. Your Mothership Core should go and float out front and just scout around for anything coming in. And of course, especially if you see Banelings or Roaches, then you really want to reinforce your wall. Extra gateways behind the gap in the wall, behind any pylon weaknesses. And that way, once you buy enough time, you get out an Immortal, you get out a couple of Adepts, maybe a Stalker or two. That combined with Overcharge usually can hold on against just about everything. And you can still get the DT Shrine. Showtime, when I asked him, he was saying a lot of the time he'll just kind of go Glaives because it's the cheaper upgrade. Ignore the DT Shrine for now. Focus on the defense and then just counterattack with all the Adepts that he's making and speed up his gateway count. Other players said they still like to rush the DTs, or at least get the DT Shrine roughly on time. But obviously their initial focus is getting out an Immortal, chrono boosting that from the Robo, using their overcharges wisely, and walling off very, very well. So guys, that's going to finish up for today's show. Thank you very much for hanging out. Hopefully this helps you out. Very solid opening, something a lot of Zergs complain about, so something that's well worth learning. It's very solid, very well rounded, and it gives you the opportunities for that cool micro. So guys, don't forget to tag your territory. Anyone who wants to send in replays for this week's ICYFAR, you have like 12 hours from this video going up to send them in. Check out the information below and send in your replays to get them commentated by myself. That's all for now, guys. Thank you very much for hanging out. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a garden gnome in the gonads. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.